it's Alec Torelli, and welcome to the Hand of the Day, where I take your hands from my Hello Alec series, feature the best one here on this channel. I'm bringing you this hand from Terme. It's, Googled it. I mean, it's an awesome thermal bath place near Venice in Italy, continuing our road trip up from Florence, and we stopped by here. So, we got an awesome hand for you today here from a tournament, but before we get into it, I want to give you a quick reminder. After this video, be sure to head over to my blog, alectorelli.com. I share a ton more information on this hand and every hand of the day, where I break down the math, screenshots with all the programs I use to study poker and improve, and all the decision-making process I use, absolutely free on my blog. So head over and check that out after this video. So, we're playing 300, 600 blinds. We got about 45,000 in chips, early stages of a tournament. 63 players enter the tournament, 6 players cash. So we're really in the early stages here, like an hour into the tournament. So players are going to be playing a little tighter. We built up a decent sized stack already, and we get involved in a pot against the other chip leader at the table. So he min raises in second position, and we call in the cutoff. 8-handed, we call in the cutoff with ace queen offsuit. I think it's totally fine here. I think 3-betting, there's something to be said about 3-betting here and just isolating the pot, maybe folding to a 4-bet and just taking the pot down pre-flop to not get too involved. But it's fine to call, let the blinds in, and just play conservative, keep the pot small. I think calling is totally standard here, so that's fine. The flop comes queen, deuce, deuce, rainbow. And we have a read on our opponent now that kind of comes into play here. We saw him slow play a hand earlier where he flopped the nuts, and his default play was to check call all the way down. So I think in a spot like this where it comes queen, deuce, deuce, and now he checks, there could be something to be said about he might be slow playing here. But our read is that he's a straightforward ABC player, but I'm a little skeptical about the viability of our read here because we've only seen him play one other hand, and he really didn't do anything that weird. He slow played the nuts, the flop comes ace, king, king. He has ace, king. It's not like a ridiculous play or anything to make an inference from. He actually played the hand pretty standard. And so when the flop comes queen, deuce, deuce, and he's the pre-flop raiser, and he checks, I'm not saying that it definitely means he's slow playing because he has that tendency, but empirically, it's an odd line that people take. People generally don't check after being the pre-flop raiser, especially on a really dry board here, like queen, deuce, deuce. So, against a really good player, a player that has a balanced range, I'm cautious about betting here. I'm cautious about betting with ace queen. I'm cautious about betting with any hand here in my range, simply because my opponent could still have aces or kings. Or queens full, and I essentially can't because I didn't 3-bet pre-flop. So his range is still stronger than mine, so I, from a game theory standpoint, I'm just skeptical of betting here. He can check raise me credibly, and it makes it really tough for me to play this hand. Even the top of my range, even the best hand I could have, which we have here is ace queen, is still tough to play against a check raise. I don't mind even checking back here, getting value from hands like jacks or tens on later streets, or even something like queen 10. The key thing to keep in mind is there's not many hands that you're going to get 3 streets of value from, so checking for pot control and to get value later on is definitely a viable option here. It's good for your range, and it allows you to have strong hands in your range when you check back the flop. It also protects you against getting in a spot like you get in here, which we'll go into now. So we decided to bet 1,300. The pot is 3,600. I really like our bet sizing here. We don't have to bet big to fold out bluffs from our opponent, and we don't have to bet big to get value from hands like jacks. I think betting small here with our whole range is a great play. It gives us a cheap price on our bluffs, so credit to you, man. Good job. Now our opponent does the dreaded check raise. He makes it 5,300. We go on to say that your read here is that he would never check raise with aces or kings, and you go a step further and say he can't really have aces or kings because he min-raised pre-flop.
He could have pocket aces or pocket kings, but I am still doubtful. His min-raise pre-flop made it less likely that he has bullets or cowboys.
Those are 2 assumptions that I really want to challenge. One is min-raise pre-flop, especially when the stacks are pretty short at this table, is pretty standard play from early position. Generally, people have strong hands. Min-raising is kind of a standard play that people make, so I think people make that play with their entire range. And I think if you're under the assumption that people are going to raise bigger with strong hands and smaller with weak hands, then that player would be too exploitable. It would be too easy to play against him because he would give away the strength of his hand pre-flop with his raise size. So I think we have to believe that he could have any hand in his range here, given his raise size. That might just be his default play. You also said you only saw him play one other hand pre-flop, so you can't really make an inference that's accurate about his raise size. Secondly, you say he can't check raise here with aces or kings because he'd most likely check call and let you keep bluffing. Well, what you have to consider here is you're projecting your way of playing poker onto your opponent. What you're thinking here is that you might not check raise with aces or kings, or you might not min raise pre-flop with those hands because it doesn't make sense to you or it doesn't produce a credible line, but that might not be what your opponent is thinking. And I think a classic mistake that players make is they think about the other person's range from their point of view. They're in their own shoes and try to look at the world from someone else's point of view. That's a key mistake people make in poker. The way that good players become great is they see the world from the other player's point of view. So don't try and think about what you would do or what you have or what makes sense to you. Look at it from your opponent's perspective. And right now, we don't really have enough information to make a definitive answer one way or another. So I think you have to leave all those assumptions aside and just assume that he could have aces or kings here because that's what he's representing. And given that that's what he's representing, it's a credible hand he could have. We have to be fearful of that hand. So you also got to consider that if you are under the assumption he's going to just let you keep bluffing here, most of the time people don't check the flop here with air. Like I said before, they're generally inclined to bet out with their air here. If he has Jack-10 suited, he's just going to bet the flop and try and win the pot. He's a pre-flop raiser. He can credibly rep a big hand. Why not bet the flop? Secondly, if he check calls here, how are you going to react here as the aggressor in the hand? Are you really going to barrel away 3 streets when your opponent raised in second position and check called the flop? Probably not. You're going to be a little scared that he might be slow playing again, which was your read before. Or you're going to be scared that he might have a bluff catcher like Queen King or Queen Jack, and he's not going to fold that on the turn. So it's hard to think that you're going to be betting here on multiple streets. All this is to say that it's very credible, in my opinion, that your opponent has aces or kings. Your range is capped. The best hand you could have, what your range is capped means is that the best hand you could have here is ace-queen. You can't have queens because you would have 3-bet pre-flop, and it's really, really unlikely you're calling with a deuce in your hand. When someone raises in second position, you probably don't call pre-flop with ace-deuce. So it's a great spot to check raise with kings to try and get value from a hand that you likely have, which is a queen. He gets much more value from you by check raising than he does by calling, because if you have a queen and he check calls the flop, you're going to check back the turn for pot control. If he check raises the flop, you're going to call his check raise, and so you're forced to put more money in the pot every time that you have an inferior hand to his aces or kings. So I love his check raise here. I think it's a very credible play. It's a great play by this guy, and the fact that he's capable of making this play shows that he has a depth of understanding that we just discussed here, which would challenge my assumption to you that he's a weak ABC player. It looks to me like this guy's a really solid player, and so I think that you're in a tough spot now. That being said, you have to make a decision. Of course, I would call the check raise on the flop here. He could still be bluffing. He could be repping aces or kings. He could have ace-king and be trying to get me off a weak hand like jacks or tens, or just take down the pot or get me to fold a queen. I would call the check raise on the flop, but I'm definitely not loving my hand.
So, I decided to call, in position. The turn is sick. Another deuce.
So on the turn, the pot is 14,000. It comes another deuce. Ironically, this improves our hand to a full house, but against our opponent's range, it actually doesn't really improve our hand. It kind of keeps us more stuck in the pot because our absolute hand strength improved, and now we have a full house. It's psychologically a little bit harder to fold, but also it actually hurts us the times that our opponent, by happenstance, has a queen. If he has something like Queen Jack or Queen 10, King Queen, some players check raise to sort of find out where they're at or take the pot down. Now we chop with those hands, so we're calling essentially to win half of the pot, whereas before we were calling to win the whole pot. It's really unlikely that our opponent's going to continue bluffing, so his range is now condensed to queens and then kings or aces, or if he has ace deuce by some chance, then he still has better hands than us. So we're basically calling for half the pot. So this card actually hurts us relative to our opponent's range. It's really important to keep that in mind because you're playing for less of the pot than you were before.
Deuce. He now makes it 6,000.
So he bets out 6,000 into 14,000. I mean, serious consideration should be given into folding the turn, you have to ask yourself, what percentage of the time is your opponent bluffing here? It's pretty small. I don't think if he has something like ace king, he's going to bluff on this dry of a turn. Your hand looks like a queen when you call a check raise on the flop, and I don't think that he's going to ever expect you to fold a queen. He might take one more stab and try and get you to fold hands like jacks or tens or nines, but you're probably going to fold those hands to a check raise on the flop. So I think when you call the flop, your range is condensed to queens, and your opponent is likely to react very well against that range. He's going to check his bluffs and bet his stronger hands. So you're really in a tough spot here, even though you're in position with a full house, which is one of the best hands you could have, if not the best hand you could have. You're in a terrible spot. So a serious consideration should be given into folding the turn here, and you should ask yourself, how often would you be bluffing in your opponent's spot against the big stack at this point in the tournament against a player who called the check raise on the flop? Probably never. We could call the turn, see what happens on the river, hope he shuts down essentially, but I think that most of the time that people are going to bet the turn here, they're going to try and represent those aces or kings on the river and get you to fold your queen. So I don't know, this is a really tough spot, and I might just let the hand go here. Even though some of the time you're folding the best hand, it's better just to cut your losses and preserve your stack, not put yourself in a really, really tough spot on the river. So we go ahead and call the turn. Now the pot is 26,000, the river comes a complete blank. It's a 4, changes nothing. Our opponent makes a huge bet now, 17,000. And in tournaments, big bets are much more impactful than they are in cash games. In cash games, you get direct odds to call based on the probability that you're going to win the pot. Your only calculation you need to make is the percentage of the time you're likely to be good, the percentage of the time you're likely to have the best hand. Here we do that, and we find that you need to be right about 25-30% of the time to justify calling. I think you have to ask yourself, is it likely your opponent's going to bluff here 25 or 30%? Probably not. I don't think people bluff here hardly ever. He's probably bluffing something like 5%. So even if this were a cash game, I would probably fold. But that being said, in a tournament, preserving your stack is so much more important because your chips are worth a lot. So you can't really afford to risk your chips in order to try and gain more, because gaining chips doesn't help you as much as losing chips hurts you in a tournament. So preserving the chips you have is much more important than taking a risk, especially in a marginal spot, to gain a little bit more. So I would fold this hand here, preserve my stack in the tournament, try to get closer to money and cash, which is how you actually produce a profit in a tournament. So I think the key thing to keep in mind is that your opponent's not bluffing here 25% of the time. You got to make a fold. How would you play the hand in his position is a good question to ask yourself. All right, a lot of information here, crunched all into one video. Hope you took something away from it. For more for the hand of the day, please keep sending me your guys' hands. Head over to my blog, alectorelli.com, where I share a lot more information on this hand and all my hands in general. I break down all the math and my decision-making process for you guys, absolutely free. So head over and check that out. Subscribe to my YouTube, putting out a lot more hands. You guys have a hand every day coming this way and hand of the days every week. So a lot more good content for you right here. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.